There is a people in the Bible whose story is so dark, so twisted, and so full of impossible twists that most preachers would rather not talk about them. A people born from one of the most shameful nights in the Old Testament. A people whose chief god demanded that parents burn their own children alive as an offering. A people that tried to destroy Israel with sorcery, seduction, and war. A people cursed by Isaiah, by Jeremiah, by Ezekiel, by Amos, and by Zephaniah. 5 different prophets pronounced their death sentence, and yet from the blood of this people, from their direct family line, came a woman whose name appears in the genealogy of Jesus Christ in Matthew chapter 1, that people is called Moab, and their complete history, from the cave where they were born to the ruins where they vanished, is one of the most shocking, most complex, and most theologically profound narratives in all of Scripture. What you are about to hear over the next several minutes is not a summary. It is the complete story. Every chapter, every war, every betrayal, every prophecy, and at the end, a mystery that connects the darkest cave in Genesis with the most radiant manger in the Gospels. It all began in a cave in the mountains near a place called Zoar, south of the Dead Sea. And to understand what happened in that cave, we need to rewind a few hours to the moment the sky opened up over Sodom and Gomorrah. Lot, Abraham's nephew, was living in Sodom. To understand how he got there, we need to go back to Genesis chapter 13. Abraham and Lot had accumulated so many flocks and so much wealth in Egypt that the land could not sustain them both together. Their shepherds were constantly fighting over water and pasture. Abraham, with a generosity that defines his character, told Lot to choose first. If you go to the left, I will go to the right. If you go to the right, I will go to the left. And Lot looked up. The text says he saw the entire plain of the Jordan, that it was well watered everywhere, like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt. It was the most beautiful land in sight, the most productive, the most promising, and Lot chose it. But the text immediately adds something that Lot apparently ignored. The men of Sodom were exceedingly wicked and sinful against the Lord. Lot's decision was purely economic. He chose the land for its fertility, not for its morality. And that decision placed him at the center of the most spectacular destruction in the Old Testament, because that fertile land was surrounded by deeply wicked cities. Genesis 18 records that the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah was so great, and their sin so grave, that God himself came down to investigate the situation. Abraham interceded. He asked God not to destroy the city if there were 50 righteous people, then 45, then 40, 30, 20, 10. God accepted every negotiation, but not even 10 righteous people were found in all of Sodom. 2 angels arrived at the gate of the city. Lot received them, and that very night the men of Sodom surrounded the house, demanding that Lot hand over the visitors. The text of Genesis 19 is explicit. All the men of the city, from the youngest to the oldest, surrounded the house. Not a gang, not a group, all of them. Lot went out and tried to reason with them. He begged them not to do such a wicked thing. He even offered his 2 virgin daughters in place of the visitors, a decision that reveals the absolute desperation of the moment. The mob rejected the offer and threatened to do something worse to Lot. The angels pulled Lot inside, shut the door, and struck the entire crowd with blindness. At dawn, the angels ordered Lot to get his family out immediately. Take your wife, your 2 daughters, and anyone you have in the city, because we are about to destroy this place. Lot went to speak with his sons-in-law. The men engaged to his daughters, but they thought he was joking. They did not believe him. The text says that when Lot hesitated, the angels grabbed him by the hand, him, his wife, and his 2 daughters, and practically dragged them out of the city. God's mercy was literal, physical. He pulled them out by force. The instruction was clear: flee for your life. Do not look back. Do not stop anywhere on the plain. Escape to the mountains so you will not be destroyed." Lot asked for a change. He could not make it to the mountain in time. He pleaded for Zoar, a small city nearby. God granted it, but Lot's wife looked back. The text does not say why. It does not explain whether it was nostalgia, curiosity, or conscious disobedience. It only says she looked back and became a pillar of salt in an instant, without further warning, without a second chance. Then God rained sulfur and fire from the sky on Sodom, on Gomorrah, on the entire plain, on all the inhabitants, and on all the vegetation. Abraham got up that morning and looked toward where the cities had been. What he saw was smoke rising from the land, like smoke from a furnace. Everything was gone. The cities, the people, the fields, the trees, everything. And this is where the story of Moab truly begins. Lot, terrified, did not stay in Zoar. He was afraid to stay there. He went up into the mountains with his 2 daughters and took refuge in a cave. Think about what this man had just lost. His home, his city, his wife, his sons-in-law, his entire estate, his social standing, everything destroyed in a single night. And now he was in a damp cave with his 2 daughters, with no visible future, no plan, no apparent hope. What happened next in that cave is one of the most disturbing episodes in the entire Bible. Genesis 19, verses 30 through 38, records the following. The older daughter told the younger that their father was old and that there was no man on earth who could be with them in the customary way. Her proposal was to get their father drunk and sleep with him to preserve the family line. And that is what they did. The first night, the older daughter got Lot drunk and slept with him. The text says that Lot did not know when she lay down or when she got up. The following night, the older daughter told the younger to do the same. And she did. Both of Lot's daughters became pregnant by their own father. The older gave birth to a son and named him Moab, which scholars interpret as derived from the Hebrew meaning from the father. The younger gave birth to a son and named him Ben-Ami, meaning son of my people. Ben-Ami became the father of the Ammonites. Moab became the father of the Moabites. 2 entire nations were born from incest in a cave after the destruction of Sodom. Now, before we go any further, there is something important to understand. The biblical text does not justify what happened. It does not celebrate it. It does not minimize it. It simply records it. Some commentators have tried to explain the daughters' actions by saying they genuinely believed that all of civilization had been destroyed, that no man was left on earth, and that they were acting out of a survival instinct for the species. Others point out that the daughters had grown up in Sodom, surrounded by a culture where moral standards were completely distorted. Whatever the psychological explanation, the result was the same. 2 peoples came out of that cave who would be perpetual enemies of Israel for over 1,000 years. Notice something. The Bible does not hide the shameful origins of nations. It does not dress them up. It does not invent pretty founding stories like the Greeks and Romans did with their myths of gods and heroes. The Bible tells the truth. Moab was born from incest, and that uncomfortable truth is part of the record because God does not need to embellish history to demonstrate his sovereignty over it. Moab, as a nation, settled east of the Dead Sea on a high plateau that today belongs to the Kingdom of Jordan. Moabite territory stretched from the Arnon River in the north to the Zered Brook in the south. It was fertile land, good for herding and farming. The plateau of Moab sits roughly 3,000 feet above the level of the Dead Sea, giving it a milder climate and more regular rainfall than the surrounding desert regions. The prophet Isaiah, in chapter 16, describes Moab as a land of vineyards and fruitful fields. Jeremiah 48 mentions the cities of Heshbon, Elealeh, Jahaz, Mibvath, Dibon, Nebo, Beth-Diblathaim, Kiriathaim, and many others. Moab was not a nomadic camp. It was an organized civilization with cities, walls, temples, and an established monarchy. But what defined Moab more than its geography was its religion. And this is where the story turns truly dark. The chief god of the Moabites was called Kemosh. The Bible mentions him in several passages. In Numbers 21, verse 29, the text calls the Moabites the people of Kemosh. In Judges 11, Jephthah refers to Kemosh as the god of the Moabites when he negotiates with the Ammonite king. But the most revealing thing about Kemosh comes from what archaeology and ancient texts tell us about the kind of worship he received. Kemosh was a god who demanded human sacrifice, and not just any sacrifice, child sacrifice, the most innocent, the most defenseless, those who represented the future of the family. Archaeologists have found evidence of similar practices throughout the ancient Levant. Kemosh shared characteristics with Moloch, the Ammonite god, and with certain forms of Baal. What these gods had in common was a theology of terror. The idea that the greater the sacrifice, the greater the response from the god. And there was no greater sacrifice than a child, your own flesh, your own blood, your own future burned on a stone altar to appease a deity that fed on suffering. The most direct evidence comes from the Bible itself. In 2 Kings chapter 3, when King Mesha of Moab was losing a battle against the combined forces of Israel, Judah, and Edom, the text says that Mesha took his firstborn son, who was to reign after him, and offered him as a burnt offering on the wall. Burnt offering. The same Hebrew word used for the sacrifices burned at the temple in Jerusalem. Mesha burned his own son alive on the city wall in full view of 3 armies. And the text says that after that act there was great wrath against Israel, and they withdrew. This detail is chilling for several reasons. First, it shows that child sacrifice was not something marginal or secret in Moabite culture. The king did it publicly on the city wall as an official religious act in a moment of national crisis. Second, the fact that the armies of Israel withdrew after the sacrifice suggests the event had a devastating psychological impact. Some scholars believe the wrath mentioned in the text was God's wrath against Israel for provoking a situation where a pagan king sacrificed his own son. Others believe it was a reaction of human horror. Either way, the retreat of Israel after watching a father burn his son alive on a wall says something profound about the power of horror as a weapon of war. The Mesha Stele, also known as the Moabite stone, is one of the most important archaeological discoveries related to the Old Testament. It was found in 1868 in Dibon, the ancient capital of Moab, by a German missionary named Frederick Klein. The stone is approximately 3.5 feet tall and 2 feet wide, carved from black basalt. When the local Bedouins learned that Europeans were willing to pay a fortune for it, they tried to break it apart, to sell the fragments separately. They heated the stone with fire and threw cold water on it, shattering it into pieces. Fortunately, before the destruction, a French officer named Charles Clermont Ganneau had sent an agent to make a paper impression of the inscription. Thanks to that impression and the fragments recovered afterward, most of the text was reconstructed. Today, the restored stone is on display at the Louvre Museum in Paris. The inscription contains 34 lines written in Moabite, a language nearly identical to Biblical Hebrew. The linguistic similarity between Moabite and Hebrew is so great that a speaker of ancient Hebrew could have read the inscription with relative ease. This confirms what the Bible implies. Moab and Israel shared common linguistic roots derived from their shared ancestor, Abraham and Lot. In the inscription, Mesha tells his version of the events recorded in 2 Kings chapter 3. What is fascinating is that Mesha mentions the God of Israel by name. He uses the tetragrammaton YHWH, and he says that Kemosh was angry with his land, which is why Omri, king of Israel, was able to dominate Moab for many years. But then he says Kemosh gave him the victory. Mesha describes how he captured Israelite cities, how he killed their inhabitants, and how he dedicated the sacred objects of YHWH to Kemosh. In one particularly chilling line, Mesha says he took the sacred vessels of YHWH and dragged them before Kemosh. Think about what that means. The utensils dedicated to the God of Israel were taken as spoils of war and presented before an idol that fed on child sacrifice. But the most important archaeological confirmation from the Mesha Stele is that it mentions the house of David. Although the exact reading of these lines has been debated by scholars, the majority accept that the inscription contains a reference to the Davidic dynasty. This is significant because it confirms that David was not a mythological character. He was a historical figure whose dynasty was known even by the enemy kings of Israel. Now let us step back a bit in the timeline to understand how Moab interacted with Israel from the very beginning. The first major direct confrontation between Moab and Israel during the period of the Judges involves a king and an assassin. Judges 3 tells us that the children of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord, and God strengthened Eglon, king of Moab, against Israel. Eglon, allied with the Ammonites and the Amalekites, defeated Israel and took the city of Palms, which is Jericho. Israel served Eglon for 18 years under Moabite rule. Eglon was a very fat man. The text says so explicitly, not as an insult, but as a narrative detail that will be crucial for what comes next. When the children of Israel cried out to the Lord, God raised up a deliverer for them. His name was Ehud, son of Gera, from the tribe of Benjamin, and he was left-handed. In a world where almost everything was designed for right-handed people, being left-handed was a tactical advantage that nobody anticipated. Ehud made a short, double-edged sword, about 1.5 feet long, and strapped it under his clothing on his right thigh. The guards who searched visitors to the king checked the left side, where a right-handed man would naturally carry his weapon. Nobody checked the right side. Ehud entered with a tribute for the king. After delivering the tribute, he sent the people who accompanied him away. Then he went back to the king and told him he had a secret message from God. Eglon rose from his throne. They were alone in the upper room of his summer quarters. Ehud reached with his left hand, drew the sword from his right thigh, and plunged it into the king's belly. The fat closed over the blade. He could not even pull the sword back out of the body. Ehud left, locked the doors behind him, and escaped. Eglon's servants found the doors locked and assumed the king was using the bathroom. They waited until they were embarrassed. When they finally opened the doors, they found the king dead on the floor. By then, Ehud had already reached the hill country of Ephraim, blown the trumpet, and the Israelites had come down to seize the fords of the Jordan. They killed about 10,000 Moabites that day, all strong and valiant men. Not one escaped. And Moab was subdued under the hand of Israel. The land had rest for 80 years. That is the first recorded victory of Israel over Moab in the book of Judges. A left-handed man with a hidden sword brought down an entire 18-year occupation. But Moab did not learn its lesson. It kept confronting Israel again and again over the centuries that followed. When Israel came out of Egypt and walked through the wilderness for 40 years, their final route took them east of the Jordan River, directly into territory that bordered Moab. Deuteronomy chapter 2 records a specific instruction from God to Moses. Do not harass Moab or engage them in war, for I will not give you any of their land as a possession, since I have given Ar to the descendants of Lot as their inheritance. God protected Moab from Israel, not because Moab deserved it, but because of the family connection to Lot, Abraham's nephew. God remembered that Lot was family, and because of that memory, Moab was untouchable during the conquest. But Moab did not know that, and their king, a man named Balak, son of Zippor, was terrified. Numbers 22 says that Moab was in great dread of the children of Israel. Balak had seen what Israel did to the Amorites. Sihon, king of the Amorites, a fearsome warrior who controlled the region, had been crushed. Og, king of Bashan, a giant whose iron bed measured over 13 feet long, had fallen. Two kings that Moab could never have defeated, wiped out in weeks by this desert people. Balak looked at the horizon and saw 600,000 tents, and he panicked. What he did next changed the history of the region forever. Balak sent messengers across the Euphrates River to the land of Pethor to find a man named Balaam, son of Beor. Balaam was a diviner of international fame. His reputation was that whoever he blessed was blessed, and whoever he cursed was cursed. He was, in essence, a long-range spiritual weapon. Balak could not win with swords. He would try to win with curses. The messengers arrived at Balaam's with divination fees in hand. "Come, I beg you, curse this people for me, for they are too mighty for me. Perhaps then I can defeat them and drive them from the land. For I know that whoever you bless is blessed, and whoever you curse is cursed." Balaam asked them to spend the night. He would consult God, and here comes the unexpected. God appeared to Balaam, a pagan prophet, a Gentile diviner. God spoke to him directly. "Do not go with them. Do not curse the people, for they are blessed." Balaam obeyed. He sent the messengers back, but Balak did not give up. He sent a second delegation, more princes, more distinguished, with more money. Balaam said that even if Balak gave him his house full of silver and gold, he could not go beyond the word of God. But he asked them to stay one more night. This time God told him to go with them, but only to say what God instructed. What happened on the road is one of the most extraordinary events in all of Scripture. Balaam saddled his donkey and set out with the princes of Moab. But God's anger burned because he went, and the angel of the Lord positioned himself in the road as an adversary. Balaam could not see him, but the donkey could. The animal saw the angel with a drawn sword and turned off the road into a field. Balaam struck her to get her back on the road. The angel stood in a narrow path between vineyards with a wall on each side. The donkey saw the angel and pressed against the wall, crushing Balaam's foot. Balaam struck her again. The angel moved ahead and stood in a place so narrow there was no room to pass to the right or to the left. The donkey lay down on the ground, and Balaam, furious, beat her with his staff. Then God opened the donkey's mouth, and the animal spoke. She literally spoke with a human voice. She said to Balaam something that sounds almost comical, if it were not so serious. "What have I done to you, that you have struck me these 3 times?" Balaam answered, as if talking to an animal were completely normal. "Because you have made a fool of me. If I had a sword in my hand, I would kill you right now." The donkey replied, "Am I not your donkey, which you have ridden all your life to this day? Have I ever been in the habit of doing this to you?" And Balaam said no. Then God opened Balaam's eyes, and he saw the angel with the sword. The prophet who could see the future of nations could not see an angel 10 feet away. An animal had more spiritual discernment than the most sought-after man among the kings of the ancient world. The angel told Balaam that his path was reckless, that the donkey had saved him 3 times, that if the animal had not turned aside, the angel would have killed him already. Balaam bowed down and offered to go back, but the angel told him to continue with the men, on the condition that he speak only exactly what God commanded. What happened next on the heights of Moab is one of the most powerful prophetic sequences in the entire Old Testament. Balak took Balaam to 3 different high places, so that from there he could curse Israel. Each time, Balaam ordered 7 altars to be built and offered 7 bulls and 7 rams. And each time, instead of a curse, what came out of Balaam's mouth was a devastating blessing. The first prophecy from Bamoth Baal was direct. "How can I curse whom God has not cursed?" How can I denounce whom the Lord has not denounced? Balaam declared that Israel was a people dwelling alone, not counting itself among the nations, that no one could number them. And he ended with a phrase that must have frozen the blood in Balak's veins. Let me die the death of the righteous, and let my end be like his. The prophet hired to curse was asking to die like the blessed. Balak was furious. He took him to a second location, to the top of Pisgah. Maybe from a different angle the curse would work. They built altars, they offered sacrifices, and Balaam prophesied again. God is not a man, that he should lie, nor a son of man, that he should change his mind. Has he said, and will he not do it? Has he spoken, and will he not fulfill it? Behold, I have received a command to bless. He has blessed, and I cannot reverse it. He has not observed iniquity in Jacob, nor has he seen wickedness in Israel. The Lord his God is with him, and the shout of a king is among them. The second prophecy was even more powerful than the first. Balaam was declaring that God's blessing upon Israel was irrevocable, that not even a prophet with supernatural powers could reverse what God had decided. Balak was paying a fortune for a man to contradict the will of the Creator of the universe. And every attempt failed more spectacularly than the one before. Balak tried a third time. He took him to the top of Peor, overlooking the desert, and this time Balaam did not even use his usual methods of divination. The Spirit of God came directly upon him, and what came out of his mouth was the most extensive and beautiful blessing of all. How lovely are your tents, O Jacob, your dwelling places, O Israel, like valleys that stretch out, like gardens beside a river, like aloes planted by the Lord, like cedars beside the waters. Blessed are those who bless you, and cursed are those who curse you. With those last words, Balaam sealed something that Balak did not want to hear. Cursed are those who curse you. The king who had paid to have Israel cursed had just heard that cursing Israel was a curse upon himself. But Balaam did not stop there. He pronounced a fourth prophecy. And this was the most staggering of all, a messianic prophecy pronounced by a pagan prophet, centuries before the prophets of Israel. I see him, but not now. I behold him, but not near. A star shall come out of Jacob, and a scepter shall rise out of Israel, that shall crush the forehead of Moab, and destroy all the sons of Sheth. The star of Jacob, the scepter of Israel. Jewish and Christian tradition has interpreted this prophecy as a direct reference to the Messiah. A pagan prophet hired to curse ended up prophesying the coming of Christ. And in that very same prophecy, he announced the destruction of Moab. The people who had hired him had just heard their own death sentence from the mouth of their own weapon. But the story of Balaam did not end with the prophecies. What came next was far worse. Balaam could not curse Israel with his mouth, but he found another way to destroy them. Numbers 31 verse 16 reveals that it was Balaam who advised the Moabites and Midianites to use their women as a weapon. The plan was simple and diabolical. If you cannot curse Israel from the outside, make Israel curse itself from the inside. Send beautiful women into the camp. Let them seduce the men. Let them invite them to eat meat sacrificed to their idols. Let them drag them into idolatry. And then the God of Israel, who does not tolerate unfaithfulness, will do the job for you. The plan worked. Numbers 25 records that Israel was camped at Shittim when the people began to commit sexual immorality with the daughters of Moab. The women invited the people to the sacrifices of their gods, and the Israelites ate and bowed down before the gods of Moab. Israel joined itself to Baal of Peor, and the anger of the Lord burned against Israel. Think about Balaam's strategy from a military perspective. What he did was identify the one weakness of an invincible army. Israel could not be defeated from the outside. No army could beat them. No curse could touch them. God himself was their shield. But if Israel became corrupt from within, if it voluntarily abandoned the God who protected it, then it would lose that protection, and it would become vulnerable. Balaam understood this with diabolical clarity. He did not try to break down the wall. He got Israel to open the gate from the inside. A plague fell upon the camp. 24,000 Israelites died. 24,000. What the entire army of Moab could not accomplish with swords, the women of Moab accomplished with seduction. What Balaam could not achieve with prophecies, he achieved with a whispered piece of advice in Balak's ear. The plague only stopped when Phinehas, grandson of Aaron the priest, took a spear and acted with radical zeal. An Israelite named Zimri, a prince of the tribe of Simeon, had brazenly brought a Midianite woman named Cosbi into the camp in full view of Moses and the entire congregation who were weeping at the entrance of the tabernacle. Phinehas followed them into the tent and drove the spear through both of them with a single thrust, and the plague stopped. God said that Phinehas had made atonement for the children of Israel through his zeal. He gave him a covenant of peace and a perpetual priesthood. But the damage was done, and God did not forget who was responsible. In the subsequent war against Midian, recorded in Numbers 31, Balaam was found among the Midianites and executed by the sword. The prophet, who could not be stopped by an angel, was finally stopped by Israelite soldiers, and his name became synonymous with spiritual corruption. The New Testament mentions him 3 times as an example of what not to do. 2 Peter 2 speaks of the way of Balaam. Jude verse 11 speaks of the error of Balaam for profit. Revelation 2 speaks of the doctrine of Balaam, who taught Balak to put a stumbling block before the children of Israel. After this episode, the relationship between Moab and Israel was marked forever, and the law reflected this reality. Deuteronomy 23, verses 3 through 6, establishes a direct prohibition. No Ammonite or Moabite shall enter the assembly of the Lord. Even to the 10th generation, none of them shall enter the assembly of the Lord forever, because they did not meet you with bread and water on the road when you came out of Egypt, and because they hired Balaam son of Beor from Pethor in Mesopotamia to curse you. You shall not seek their peace or their prosperity all your days forever. That is one of the most severe prohibitions in the entire Mosaic law. It not only excluded the Moabites from the people of God, but it also forbade even seeking their welfare forever. Not even in the 10th generation. The explicit reasons were 2 things. First, the lack of hospitality when Israel passed through their territory. Second, the attempt to curse through Balaam. Moab had committed 2 offenses that God considered unforgivable at the national level. And yet, what is about to happen in the story will prove that God is greater than his own law. Or rather, that the grace of God operates in dimensions that the law cannot contain. During the period of the Judges, the land of Israel suffered a severe famine. A man from Bethlehem in Judah named Elimelech took his wife Naomi and their 2 sons, Mahlon and Chilion, and went to live in the fields of Moab. The man who was supposed to never seek the peace of Moab went to seek bread in Moab, and there Elimelech died. His 2 sons married Moabite women. One was named Orpah, the other was named Ruth. And after about 10 years, both Mahlon and Chilion died as well. Naomi was left alone, no husband, no sons, in a foreign land. When Naomi decided to return to Bethlehem, she told her daughters-in-law to go back to their Moabite families. Orpah, after weeping, agreed. She kissed her mother-in-law and left. But Ruth refused to go, and she spoke the words that became one of the most beautiful declarations of loyalty in all of human literature. Do not urge me to leave you or to turn back from you, for wherever you go, I will go, and wherever you live, I will live. Your people shall be my people, and your God shall be my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord do so to me, and more also, if anything but death parts you and me. a Moabite woman, daughter of the people born from incest, descendant of the nation that worshipped Kemosh and burned children, a member of the ethnicity that had been excluded from the congregation of Israel forever. That woman was declaring that the God of Israel would be her God. And she was not just saying it, she was living it. She was abandoning everything she knew, every security, every cultural identity, to follow a widowed and impoverished mother-in-law into a country where people of her blood were considered cursed. What happened in Bethlehem when Ruth and Naomi arrived is a story of redemption operating on multiple levels simultaneously. Ruth went out to glean in the fields, an activity reserved for the poorest according to the law of Leviticus 19 and Deuteronomy 24. And by divine providence, she arrived at the field of a man named Boaz. Boaz was a close relative of Elimelech, Naomi's deceased husband. He was a wealthy, respectable, and God-fearing man. Boaz noticed Ruth. He asked who she was. They told him she was the Moabite woman who had come back with Naomi, and Boaz spoke to her with a kindness that defied everything the law said about Moabites. He told her to stay in his field, not to go to another, to drink from the water his servants drew, that he had heard everything she had done for her mother-in-law, and he pronounced a blessing over her. May the Lord repay your work, and may your wages be full from the Lord God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge. Pay attention. An Israelite who knew the law forbidding Moabites from entering the congregation was blessing a Moabite woman in the name of God. Grace was breaking through the barriers of the law, not annulling it, not contradicting it, but revealing that the law had a dimension deeper than ethnic exclusion. The law condemned Moab as a nation for its actions, but grace could rescue an individual from Moab through her faith. Naomi saw the opportunity. She explained to Ruth that Boaz was a kinsman redeemer, a goal in Hebrew, a relative with the legal right to redeem Elimelech's inheritance by marrying the widow. She instructed Ruth to go to the threshing floor where Boaz was sleeping after the harvest, lie down at his feet and wait for his response. Ruth obeyed. When Boaz woke at midnight and discovered a woman at his feet, he asked who she was. She answered, "I am Ruth, your servant. Spread your cloak over your servant, for you are a kinsman redeemer." Spreading the cloak was a symbol of marital protection. Ruth was asking for redemption. Boaz agreed, but there was a closer relative who had legal priority. The next day, at the city gate, before the elders, Boaz presented the case. The other relative initially wanted to redeem Elimelech's land. But when Boaz informed him that redeeming the land also meant marrying Ruth the Moabite to raise up an heir for the deceased, the relative refused. He said he could not redeem it without jeopardizing his own inheritance. He removed his sandal as a sign of legal waiver. And Boaz redeemed Ruth. What is fascinating is what the elders and the people at the city gate said as witnesses. "May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your house like Rachel and Leah, who together built up the house of Israel. May you be mighty in Ephrathah and be renowned in Bethlehem. May your house be like the house of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah, through the offspring that the Lord gives you by this young woman." They mentioned Tamar, another woman with a shameful story. Tamar disguised herself as a prostitute to conceive by her father-in-law, Judah. And here were the elders of Bethlehem comparing the union of Boaz and Ruth to that of Judah and Tamar. Two stories of marginalized women who found redemption through the line of Judah, and both ended up in the genealogy of Christ. From the union of Boaz and Ruth, a son named Obed was born. The women of Bethlehem told Naomi that a son had been born to her, that Ruth, who loved her, was better to her than 7 sons. 7 sons. In a culture where male children were the ultimate blessing, the women of Bethlehem declared that a Moabite daughter-in-law was worth more than 7 Israelite sons. Naomi took the child and placed him on her lap, and she became his nurse. The woman who had said the Lord had brought her back empty now held in her arms the grandfather of the king of Israel. Obed was the father of Jesse. Jesse was the father of David. David was the greatest king of Israel. And from the line of David, according to Matthew chapter 1, Jesus the Christ was born. Stop here for a moment and think about what just happened. The law said that no Moabite would enter the assembly of God, not even to the 10th generation. And God placed a Moabite woman in the direct bloodline of the Messiah. David's great-grandmother was a Moabite. Jesus of Nazareth had Moabite blood running through his veins. The people cursed by 5 prophets contributed their DNA to the incarnation of the Son of God. This is not a contradiction. It is the most audacious plan in the history of redemption. God took what was excluded and made it central. He took what was cursed and turned it into a channel of blessing. He took the shame of a cave of incest and transformed it into a genealogical line that ends in a manger in Bethlehem. The same Bethlehem from which Naomi fled during the famine, the same Bethlehem where Ruth arrived gleaning grain, was the same Bethlehem where Jesus was born. That is not a coincidence. That is divine architecture. David himself had a complex relationship with Moab that reveals the deepest tensions in biblical history. When David was a fugitive, hunted by Saul like an animal, he sought refuge in various places. One of them was Moab. 1 Samuel 22 says that David went to the king of Moab at Mizpah and made an extraordinary request. "Please let my father and my mother stay with you until I know what God will do for me." David entrusted his parents, the most valuable thing he had, to the care of a Moabite king, and the king accepted. David's parents lived in Moab under royal protection, while David was fighting for his life in the caves of Israel. Why did Moab accept? Probably because David had Moabite blood. His great-grandmother was Ruth. That family connection gave him diplomatic access to a king who would otherwise have been an enemy. Ruth's blood did not just give David a lineage for the throne of Israel. It gave him a refuge for his family at the most desperate moment of his life. Ruth's decision to leave Moab for Israel, made generations earlier, was now protecting the royal family of Israel from within Moab. There is something deeply poetic about that. The Moabite woman who left her homeland ended up saving her great-great-grandson's family through the very land she left behind. But later, when David became king, the relationship changed drastically. 2 Samuel 8 says that David defeated Moab and measured them with a cord, making them lie down on the ground. He measured 2 lengths of cord to put to death and 1 full length to keep alive. And the Moabites became servants to David and brought tribute. 2/3 were executed. 1/3 survived as vassals. It is a level of brutality that stands in sharp contrast to the refuge Moab had given him before. Some scholars believe something happened to David's parents in Moab, that perhaps the Moabite king betrayed them or had them killed, and David's revenge was proportional to that betrayal. The text does not explain. It only records the action and its result. Under Solomon, the relationship with Moab took a different but equally destructive turn. 1 Kings 11 says that Solomon loved many foreign women in addition to the daughter of Pharaoh, Moabite, Ammonite, Edomite, Sidonian and Hittite women. From the nations about which the Lord had said to the children of Israel, "You shall not intermarry with them, for they will surely turn your hearts after their gods." Solomon clung to these women in love. The text says he had 700 wives of royal birth and 300 concubines, a harem of 1,000 women. And in his old age, these women turned his heart after other gods. His heart was not fully devoted to the Lord his God, as the heart of his father David had been. The text is specific about what he did. Solomon followed Ashtoreth, the goddess of the Sidonians, and Milcom, the abomination of the Ammonites, and he built a high place for Kemosh, the abomination of Moab, on the hill that is east of Jerusalem. The hill east of Jerusalem is the Mount of Olives, the same mountain where Jesus would pray 1,000 years later before his crucifixion, the same mountain from which he ascended into heaven. Solomon contaminated that mount with an altar to the god that devoured children. Think about that. The wisest king in history, the man who built the most glorious temple ever dedicated to God, that same man built a shrine to Kemosh on sacred ground. And that high place was not destroyed until 300 years later, when King Josiah tore it down as part of his religious reform, recorded in 2 Kings 23. Josiah defiled it, destroyed it, and filled the place with human bones to ensure it would never be used for worship again. For 300 years, the altar of Kemosh stood on the Mount of Olives, staring directly at the temple in Jerusalem. 300 years of a false god defying the true God from the hill across the valley. Imagine that. An Israelite standing in the temple courtyard, looking east, could see the remains of the altar where children had been burned in honor of Kemosh. The presence of that altar was a constant reminder of what happens when human wisdom turns away from God. Solomon, the man who wrote Proverbs, who composed the Song of Songs, who delivered the most sublime temple dedication prayer, that same man introduced the horror of Moabite child sacrifice to the doorstep of Jerusalem. And the most painful irony is that it was built by the son of David, whose great-grandmother was a Moabite. The blood of Moab in the royal family brought the blessing of Ruth, but also the curse of Kemosh. The same family line produced both redemption and corruption. The same blood that gave rise to the genealogy of the Messiah was also the channel through which the most atrocious cult of the ancient world came to contaminate the holy mountain. After the division of the kingdom, Moab was subject to the northern kingdom of Israel. 2 Kings 1 says that after the death of Ahab, Moab rebelled against Israel. King Mesha of Moab, the same one from the famous Stele, stopped paying the annual tribute of 100,000 lambs and the wool of 100,000 rams to the king of Israel. The rebellion triggered the military campaign recorded in 2 Kings 3, where Jehoram of Israel, Jehoshaphat of Judah, and the king of Edom marched against Moab by an indirect route through the wilderness of Edom. The campaign nearly ended in disaster. After 7 days of marching, there was no water for the army or the animals. Jehoram panicked. But Jehoshaphat asked if there was a prophet of the Lord to consult, and it turned out that Elisha was there. Elisha agreed to prophesy, but only out of respect for Jehoshaphat, not for Jehoram. He had a musician brought in, and while the musician played, the hand of the Lord came upon Elisha. The prophecy was that the valley would be filled with pools of water without wind or rain, and that God would deliver Moab into their hands. The next morning, water came from the direction of Edom and filled the land. When the Moabites looked out from a distance and saw the water reflecting the morning sun, they thought it was blood. They concluded that the three armies had fought among themselves and slaughtered each other. They shouted for the plunder and rushed in disorder toward the Israelite camp. It was a perfect trap that was not even planned by humans. God used a natural optical phenomenon to create the illusion of a massacre and cause the Moabites to abandon their defensive position. Israel defeated them decisively. They destroyed the cities. They covered the fields with stones. They stopped up the springs. They cut down the fruit trees. Only the city of Kir-Hareseth remained. The slingers surrounded it. And it was then that Mesha, cornered, took his firstborn son and burned him alive on the wall. After that act, there was great wrath against Israel, and they withdrew. The campaign that began with a prophecy of victory ended with a retreat provoked by the horror of a human sacrifice. The prophets of Israel did not stay silent about Moab. One after another, they pronounced oracles of destruction that painted the future of this nation in ever darker colors. Isaiah devoted 2 full chapters to Moab. Chapters 15 and 16 contain an elegy that is both a sentence and a lament, an oracle concerning Moab. Surely in a night hour of Moab is laid waste and destroyed. Surely in a night, Kir of Moab is laid waste and destroyed. Isaiah describes a landscape of total devastation, the high places destroyed, the springs dried up, the roads full of people fleeing, refugees with their belongings on their backs. And in the midst of the destruction, Isaiah says something surprising. My heart cries out for Moab. My heart laments for Moab. The prophet who announces the destruction feels pain for the destroyed. It is not indifference. It is not celebration. It is the anguish of a messenger who delivers a sentence he himself wishes were different. Isaiah 16, verse 11, says explicitly that his heart resonates like a harp for Moab. And in verse 14 of the same chapter, he sets a deadline. Within 3 years, as a hired worker would count them, the glory of Moab will be brought into contempt with all its great multitude, and the remnant will be very small and feeble. But it was Jeremiah who devoted the most extensive and detailed oracle to Moab. Chapter 48 of Jeremiah contains 47 verses dedicated exclusively to the destruction of Moab. It is the longest oracle against a foreign nation in the entire book of Jeremiah. City by city, Jeremiah catalogues the destruction. Nebo was destroyed. Kiriathim was put to shame and captured. Heshbon lost its glory. Madmenah was silenced. Horonaim heard cries of destruction. Moab was shattered. What makes Jeremiah's oracle unique is that it explains the why of the destruction with devastating theological precision. Jeremiah 48 verse 11 says that Moab has been at ease from his youth, settling on his dregs like wine that has not been poured from vessel to vessel. He has not gone into exile, therefore his taste remains in him and his aroma is unchanged. The metaphor comes from winemaking. When wine is left in the same vessel without being decanted, it collects sediment and goes bad. Moab's comfort, its lack of trials, its smug sense of security, was what destroyed it. It was not refined by suffering, it was not purified by adversity, and so when judgment came, it did not have the spiritual depth to survive. Jeremiah 48, verse 29, identifies the specific sin with even greater clarity. We have heard of the pride of Moab. He is exceedingly proud of his loftiness, his pride, his arrogance, and the haughtiness of his heart. I know his fury, declares the Lord, but it amounts to nothing. His boasts accomplish nothing. The fundamental sin of Moab was pride, an arrogance that trusted in its fortifications, in its elevated geographic position, in its agricultural wealth, and that ignored the God who had allowed all of it. But even in the midst of total destruction, Jeremiah includes a line that opens an unexpected door. The last verse of the chapter, verse 47, says something nobody expected. Yet I will restore the fortunes of Moab in the latter days, declares the Lord. Thus far the judgment of Moab, total destruction, but future restoration. The same prophet who pronounced 46 verses of devastation closes with a promise of hope. God was not finished with Moab forever. The judgment would be complete, but not eternal. Ezekiel 25 adds his voice to the prophetic chorus. Because Moab and Seir said that the house of Judah is like all the other nations, therefore I will open the flank of Moab and hand it over to the peoples of the east. Moab's sin, according to Ezekiel, was denying the uniqueness of Israel, saying Israel was not special, that it was the same as everyone else, treating the sacred as ordinary. Amos 2 condemns Moab for a specific crime because he burned the bones of the king of Edom to lime. Not even the dead were safe from Moabite cruelty. Desecrating the remains of a dead king was an atrocity that exceeded the norms of warfare in the ancient world. and God took note. Zephaniah 2, verses 8 through 11, summarizes the final judgment. I have heard the taunts of Moab and the insults of the Ammonites, with which they have taunted my people and made boasts against their territory. The Lord will be terrifying to them, for he will starve all the gods of the earth, and every shore of the nations will bow down to him, each from its own place. 5 prophets, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Amos, Zephaniah, all saying the same thing with different words. Moab would be destroyed, its pride would be broken, its cities would become ruins, its god Kemosh would prove powerless when the judgment of the true God arrived. And it all came to pass. Secular history confirms what the prophets announced. Moab was gradually absorbed by the empires that dominated the region. The Assyrians under Tiglath-Pileser III imposed tribute on Moab in the 8th century BC. The Stele of Tiglath-Pileser mentions Salamanu of Moab among the vassal kings. Under Sennacherib and Esarhaddon, Moab continued as a tributary state. Assyrian records mention Moabite kings paying tribute regularly. Then came the Babylonians. Nebuchadnezzar used Moabite troops in his campaigns against Judah, according to 2 Kings 24, verse 2. Moab helped destroy Jerusalem. But the alliance with Babylon did not save Moab from destruction. Josephus, the 1st century Jewish historian, records that Nebuchadnezzar conquered Moab and Ammon in the 23rd year of his reign, approximately 5 years after destroying Jerusalem. The very empire that Moab helped feed ended up devouring it. After the Babylonians came the Persians, and under the Persian Empire, Moab as a national entity ceased to exist. The Nabatean Arab tribes began infiltrating Moabite territory. The Nabateans were nomadic traders who controlled the incense and spice routes between Arabia and the Mediterranean. Gradually, they went from trading through Moabite territory to permanently occupying it. By the 4th century BC, the Nabateans had completely occupied the Moabite plateau. Petra, the famous city carved into pink rock that is today one of the wonders of the world, was the Nabatean capital built on what was once Moabite and Edomite territory. The Moabites were not conquered in one great final battle. There was no dramatic moment of defeat. They simply dissolved. Their identity blended into the peoples around them. Their descendants mixed with Nabateans, Arabs, and other ethnic groups of the region. Their language stopped being spoken, their traditions stopped being practiced, their gods stopped receiving worshippers. It was a slow, silent, almost invisible death, exactly as the prophets had predicted. Jeremiah did not say Moab would fall in battle. He said it would be emptied like wine from a jar, poured out slowly until nothing remained. By the time of Jesus, Moab as a people no longer existed. The land was part of the Roman province of Arabia Petraea, or the Decapolis, at its northern edge. The cities mentioned by the prophets were ruins. The temple of Kemosh had disappeared. The Moabite language had gone extinct. Moabite culture had dissolved. The prophecies had been fulfilled with surgical precision. And here is the part that should leave you speechless. The people who were destroyed, exactly as the prophet said, the people whose God devoured children, the people who tried to curse Israel, the people who seduced 24,000 men to their death, the people excluded from the congregation forever, that people has a representative in the genealogy of the Savior of the world. Matthew chapter 1 verse 5. Salmon fathered Boaz by Rahab. Boaz fathered Obed by Ruth. Obed fathered Jesse, and Jesse fathered King David. Ruth the Moabite is on the list. Her name is written, not hidden, not disguised, not forgotten. It is right there in plain letters for everyone to read. David's great-grandmother, an ancestor of Jesus, a Moabite. And she's not the only unusual woman in that genealogy. Tamar, who disguised herself as a prostitute to become pregnant by her father-in-law Judah. Rahab, the prostitute of Jericho. Ruth, the Moabite, Bathsheba, the wife of Uriah, with whom David committed adultery. 4 women, each with a story that the society of their time would have considered shameful. And God placed them in the direct line of the Messiah, not in spite of their stories, but including their stories as an essential part of the plan. The message is devastating in its simplicity. There is no one so excluded that the grace of God cannot reach. There is no origin so dark that divine redemption cannot transform. There is no human or divine law that can limit God's ability to include anyone who genuinely takes refuge under his wings, as Boaz said of Ruth. Ruth did not come before God with the merits of her nation. She came with the renunciation of her nation. Your people will be my people. Your God will be my God. In that moment, Ruth stopped being a Moabite and became an Israelite. Not by blood, not by birth, not by law, by faith, by decision, by total surrender. And God received her so completely that he placed her in the line of the King of Kings. Now think about Jeremiah's final promise. I will restore the fortunes of Moab in the latter days. Was it fulfilled? As a nation, Moab disappeared. There is no Moabite people today. There is no kingdom of Moab. There is no temple of Kemosh. But the land that was Moab, the plateau east of the Dead Sea, is today part of Jordan, and millions of people live on that land, many of them descendants of the peoples who inhabited that region for millennia. And many of them are Christians. The Christian community in Jordan, though a minority, exists and is active. Some theologians interpret Jeremiah's promise as a spiritual restoration rather than a national one, that the descendants of those who inhabited the land of Moab would find the true God through Christ. If that interpretation is correct, then the promise is being fulfilled right now. But there is an even deeper interpretation. The restoration of Moab already began with Ruth. When a Moabite woman joined Israel by faith, the spiritual restoration of Moab was inaugurated. When Boaz redeemed her, the principle of divine rescue was manifested through a love story in a barley field. And when from that union Obed was born, and from Obed came Jesse, and from Jesse came David, and from David eventually came Jesus, the cycle was complete. Moab was destroyed as a nation, but it was restored as a bloodline in the family of the Messiah. And notice a detail that almost no one mentions. When Jesus walked the earth, when he preached the Sermon on the Mount, when he healed the sick, when he multiplied the loaves, when he died on the cross and rose on the 3rd day, the blood of Ruth the Moabite was coursing through his veins. The incarnate Son of God carried in his human DNA the genetic heritage of Moab. The most cursed people of the Old Testament contributed their biology to the incarnation of the Savior of the world. There is no more radical example of redemption in all of human history. There is no more powerful demonstration that God can transform absolutely anything into an instrument of his grace. The Apostle Paul would write centuries later in Romans 8 that all things work together for good for those who love God. All things, including incest in a cave, including a people that worshipped a God who devoured children, including a legal exclusion that said forever. God took all of that and used it as building material for the most ambitious salvation plan in the universe. The story of the Moabites is not just an ancient tale about a people that disappeared. It is a living parable about how God operates in human history. He takes the darkness and uses it as a canvas to paint the light. He takes failure and turns it into raw material for redemption. He takes exclusion and transforms it into radical inclusion. Think about all the narrative threads we have followed. Incest in a cave, a nation founded on shame, a God that feeds on burned children, a king who hires a sorcerer to curse Israel, a mass seduction that kills 24,000 people, a left-handed man with a hidden sword who assassinates a fat king, a pagan altar built by the wisest king in history, a stone carved by a Moabite king that confirms the existence of the house of David, a plague stopped by a spear, 5 prophets who pronounce a death sentence, one empire after another crushing Moab until it is erased from the map, and in the middle of all of that, a woman gleaning grain in a barley field in Bethlehem. Ruth is the golden thread that runs through all the darkness. Without Ruth, the story of Moab would be nothing but destruction, nothing but judgment, nothing but curse. But with Ruth, the story transforms into something far deeper. It becomes a demonstration that God can find a diamond in the blackest coal, that grace does not need clean material to work with, that redemption is more creative, more daring, and more unpredictable than any theologian could have ever designed. The cave where Lot slept drunk with his daughters was the lowest point of the story. The field in Bethlehem where Ruth gleaned grain was the turning point, and the manger where Jesus was born was the highest point. From the cave to the field, from the field to the manger, from shame to grace, from Moab to Bethlehem, from Kemosh to Christ. The question this story leaves you with is not about the Moabites, it is about you. If God could take the most cursed blood in the Old Testament and turn it into the genealogical line of the Savior of the world, what can He not do with your story? If God could look at a Moabite woman gleaning grain in a field and see in her the great-grandmother of a king and an ancestor of a Messiah, what might He see in you that you have not yet discovered? Ruth had nothing, no husband, no children, no inheritance, no citizenship, no legal rights, no visible future. The only thing she had was a decision. Your God will be my God. And with that decision, she changed the history of the world. The Moabites as a nation vanished more than 2,000 years ago. Their cities are ruins. Their language is dead. Their God is forgotten. But the story of Ruth is still told in every synagogue in the world during the festival of Shavuot, and her name is still read in every church when Matthew chapter 1 is opened, because the destruction of Moab was temporary, but the redemption that God wove through a Moabite woman is eternal, and that is the complete story of the terrible Moabites. From a cave of shame to the genealogy of glory, from incest to incarnation, from Kemosh to Christ. The darkest story of the Old Testament turned into one of the most radiant testimonies of the grace of God.